did I get my first book deal after 8 years of struggling to sell a book? Listen, it took me a really long time. I wrote 10 books in 8 years, but I had really been writing almost my entire life. When I was younger, I used to rewrite the endings of the books I read in middle school, and then for a little while, I wrote a mystery series for the local newspaper, and I wasn't that good at it. I thought I was, because I had won like the short story award in 7th grade and stuff like that. I really thought I was good at it, but I wasn't. And I didn't know what I didn't know, but I kept writing. And when I found the romance genre after I took kind of a community ed course, I realized that's where I wanted to go. I'd been trying all these different types of books and nothing really seemed to fit. But I liked romance because it was a happy ending book. And at the time in my life, I really needed to write about things that ended happily. So I wrote my first book, my second book, my third book. I did all of the things that you could possibly do wrong. The first thing I did really, really wrong was I printed out my entire book on a 3-hole punch and put it in a 3-ring binder, this massive thing, and mailed it off to a publisher. Without a query letter, without being invited to, just sending it off, figuring it was that good that they would definitely want to buy it. That had gone to Harlequin in England, and the British are very polite and nice when they reject you. The letter that I got back was actually very kind.
While we appreciate your effort, your manuscript isn't quite the right fit for us at this time.
And I think that if I had not gotten a kind letter at that point, I might have given up. But it was a kind letter that said, thank you, we saw some promise in your story, or something like that. Just enough to kind of keep me hooked and thinking I knew what I was doing. Looking back, I realized it was a form letter. But for me, it seemed personal enough that maybe this book could really do it. Or maybe I needed to write the next one. So instead of learning anything from those lessons, I wrote another one and another one. And I entered every contest I could. I went to conferences and I took workshops and I met other authors. And I went to every single agent and editor appointment that I could. And I queried all over the place. And I kept getting rejected. And here's the number one thing I was doing wrong. I wasn't pausing to take a breath and look back and say, what am I not getting here? I was so overly confident in what I was doing that I didn't think to say, wait, what are they saying to me here in the rejection letters? Why is my book not finaling in contest? What am I struggling with? Why am I continually getting rejected over and over again? I would just write another book thinking, well, maybe it was this plot that didn't work, or maybe this editor really doesn't like horses, or whatever it was. And if I could only fix that, then maybe the book would sell. Where my real problem was in my craft. I, honest to God, didn't know what the hell I was doing, and my writing sucked. Period. It absolutely sucked. My plots were bad. My writing was terrible. I was telling all over the place. I wasn't showing. My dialogue was stilted. My characters were stereotypes. It was awful. It is what I see in a lot of beginning writers, because I was a beginning writer and I sucked. And I got to tell you that if you write one book and publish it, chances are you haven't learned enough of your craft to write a really good book. There is the fluke, the like 1% of the 1% of writers who do write a really excellent book the first time out, but chances are good that it's not your best work, that you have so much to learn. And I was too cocky and too confident in what I was doing to sit down and accept that and really study my craft. It took until about book 8 before I finally realized maybe the problem is me. You know, like when you meet those people that have been married 10 times, you're like, the common denominator in the relationship is you. Maybe you're making some bad choices here, or maybe you're not really looking deeply enough before you just get hitched. I needed to say, 8 books rejected, 250 or something like that rejections piled up in my office. Maybe the problem is me. Maybe the problem is I write like crap. Maybe I need to fix that. And so I finally decided to put my ego aside and sit down and study everything that I was surrounded by. I did the highlighter method, which is why that's a free handout on my site, because I really want you all to learn how to plot like I did. I did that to every book that I had that I thought was really, really good. I recommend that you do it with a best-selling author, a debut author, and a mid-list author, because those are kind of your competition out there, especially the debut author. But I did it to a lot of books. And then I went back and I applied it to my book. And I'm not kidding. In 1 second, I saw exactly what my problem was. I could immediately see, because I was missing so much yellow, which was the color I used for conflict. I didn't have any for pages and pages. I had all these great descriptions. I had all this long-lasting dialogue, but I wasn't showing any kind of conflict or impact. I wasn't advancing the plot. I wasn't showing. I was just writing fast, trying to get that book out. And so when I sat down and I studied what other people were doing right and what I was doing wrong, and I looked at my book objectively, I began to see some patterns. Other important thing that I did at that time was I started working with a critique partner. Somebody who was also struggling to get published, but who was very, very good at seeing what was wrong with my books. And I could also see what was wrong with her books. The reason why that was so good was not just because she would tell me what I was doing wrong, but also because my analysis of her scenes and having to explain to her what I thought was going wrong with them forced me to sort of analyze fiction and kind of figure out what parts were missing. And I gradually learned after I started doing that for her to do it to my own work, to be objective enough to be able to say, there's not enough conflict on the page, or this dialogue goes on too long. And the third key thing that I did that got me to finally sell my first book was I started listening to my gut. If you read a lot, and I read 3 or 4 books a week, I read constantly. If you read a lot, you develop this gut instinct for what works and what doesn't. And when I learned to finally listen to my gut and pay attention to what it said when I was working on my own book, I could take those crappy scenes and turn them into something more powerful. Now, did I always know how to fix what was going wrong?
Nope.
I didn't have enough skill. I didn't have enough experience sometimes to figure out how to fix some of the plot holes and issues that I had with my books. But I could figure out how to fix enough of it that the book started getting requested by agents and editors, and things started to change. I noticed a change in my rejection letters. They began to be more specific, like these characters were great, but I didn't really like the town, or I thought you could have done a better job with their conflict or their internal journey. Like those were very specific rejection things. And I'm like, okay, I can learn how to do that. I began to apply what I read in my rejection letters, what I saw that was going wrong in my own books, and I began to really listen to what was wrong with them. Then I entered a contest where your proposal was what was being judged. That's your first 3 chapters in synopsis. And I won that contest. And that contest was judged by a senior editor at Harlequin. She read my proposal, she liked it, and she requested my entire book. Now, this book was one of the ones that I had really worked on a lot. It was number 8 out of the 10 that I wrote before I ultimately sold. And I had taken the original draft and changed it a lot by the time it went to the contest. The problem was the book had already been rejected at Harlequin. The first version of number 8 had been rejected, and they keep notes on that kind of thing. So they know that this book titled with this and with these character names and with this setting has already been there. They have a computer database that tells them what has already been through their editors, so that they're not wasting time re-rejecting a book that was already rejected. So when I went to send it in, because that editor requested it, it was rejected again, and very vehemently, because it had already been there and it had already been rejected. Even though I had changed it a lot, I don't think I expressed that in the cover letter. And so I was just, again, cocky and confident, thinking I'm just going to send it in because it won the contest, it's just going to sell. So I worked it over again, one more time. And then I had an editor that I've talked to in person, and she said, go ahead and send it to me. I explained everything that was going on, so she knew that it had already been there. And I sent it back in a 3rd time. And then I waited, and nothing happened. Months go by. I don't hear a word from them. And I kind of try to check on my book, and of course they're receiving thousands and thousands of manuscripts. Nobody knows where my book is, and nobody sees it in the computer system, and I can't figure out what happened with it. And I figure it either got lost in the system or it was rejected and I just missed the letter. So I start working on another one, but I'm kind of disheartened because I had put a lot of effort into book number 8. I really had. I can't even tell you how many times I did a full rewrite of that book. It was a lot. And when I didn't hear anything, and when I just assumed that the book was dead in the water, I just gave up on it and I moved on to another one. At the time, the closest people around me were not very supportive of my writing career. And it was really a battle for me to get the time to write and to pursue it. And I was really discouraged by that. That's hard when you're a mom and you're working full time and you're raising kids, and then you're not really finding this time to write. There were a million days when I just wanted to give up. And when that book kind of got lost, and my agent at the time said, I don't think you have what it takes. It was sort of the last straw. And everything fell apart, and I just threw everything away. Cleared off my hard drive, and I threw every manuscript I'd ever written away. That was pretty drastic because I was done. Capital letters, D-O-N-E, done. And I did not want to write and get rejected anymore. I had, like I said, a couple hundred rejections at this point. And I sat down in my office and I cried. And then a week later, I got a package in the mail. Now, in publishing, by and large, they reject you by email or by postage mail. And if they're going to buy the book, they call you. So when I got this package that was clearly my entire manuscript coming back from that editor I'd sent it to all those months ago, I figured it was another rejection and I didn't want to open it. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me and I did open the package. And inside was a revision letter from Mary Teresa Hussey, who was my very first editor at Harlequin. She is now an editor that works freelance and she's really great. I loved working with her. And in it, she said, "You're a really good writer. I think you can make this book work, but you have to basically dump half of it and start over again." I had a funny scene at the very beginning of the book and she said, "You can write romantic comedy. Come back to that and get rid of all this deep, dark, angsty stuff." That was in June of 2001. And I sat down and I ripped that book apart again. This had to be at least the 12th time that I ripped it apart from beginning to end and started all over. And I turned that book into a romantic comedy. And trust me, it was a deep, dark, angsty book before that. It was a recovering alcoholic hero who thought maybe he'd been responsible for the death of his own baby. It was dark, but I turned it around and turned it into a romantic comedy set in a small town with a lot of family and friends and that kind of close community that a lot of readers really like. And I sent it back in and I waited and I waited. And I waited. Then I saw that editor at a conference in the fall, and she asked me what else I had besides the book that I'd already sent back into her. And I came up with an idea on the fly that I had literally written on a cocktail napkin when I was on an airplane. She's like, "I like that idea. I want to see that." And so I started working on that book while I was waiting and waiting and waiting to hear. Then in December of 2001, I got that call just as I was running out the door with my kids to church for an Advent service. And the editor that I had sent the book to called and said, "I love this book. I want to buy it." And boom, I became a published author with Harlequin that eventually became HarperCollins. It was a dream come true. It was unbelievable. And it had only happened because I didn't give up. I revised that book start to finish, every single word, multiple times. And also, I was able to put my own ego aside and say, I have some learning to do. How can I do that in order to write the way that I should? That's what success really requires, is being able to step back and say, okay, maybe I don't know all the answers, and maybe I can learn from other people, and maybe I can do a better job at this. This isn't the gem that I think it is. It's more of like a piece of ore that has to be chipped away in order to find the diamond inside. That's how I made my first book deal. I've gone on to publish 87 books in 24 countries, and I've sold 8 million copies. I mean, if that's not a Cinderella story, I don't know what is. It boggles my mind still. And yet, every time I get one of my books and I see my name on the cover, I'm like, I did that, and I did that, and I did that, and 80 something more. Every bestseller list I've ever been on, every contest I've won, every good review that I have received is still a wonder to me, because I am so stunned that I was able to do it. And what's the moral of this story? If I can do it, you can absolutely do it. When I say my books were crappy, they absolutely were. You got to watch this video right here because I delve into exactly what was wrong with them. You have to believe in yourself, and you have to be strong enough to admit you don't have all the answers, and to go back and learn and polish and really hone your craft, because it's not just about the words. It is about the order that you put them in and the intention that you put on the page. And it's about persevering. I kept going when I really should have quit, because every star in the universe told me to quit. But I kept going because I was motivated and I wanted it more than I wanted to give up. So if that's you today, if you're just like, I don't think I can do this, I don't think I'll ever have a book deal, just hold on. Keep writing. Keep coming back to this channel and keep learning. And if you've had that moment of quitting, share it below in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe so that more writers can see these videos and learn how to write an amazing book.